There's no place like the Qube. Family, it's your favorite queer radio personality, Anna DeShawn, and this is the Queer News Summer Interview Series. I'm changing it up for the summer so I can take a little break from the research and script writing, and I'm trying to avoid the dreaded pod fade, okay? We only get a month and a half of sunshine here in Chicago. Okay, summertime shy is a real thing, and I'm trying to enjoy every single moment. As you know, we aren't leaving our queer news stories on the cutting room floor or anything like that. I'll definitely be sharing our top queer news stories with you before we get into the interview for the week. Now, before we get into this week's episode, I want to know, did y'all enjoy the conversation last week? So I would love for y'all to leave me a voicemail and tell me what you thought about unapologetic being Black and queer in podcasting. I left a link in the show notes where you can leave me a voicemail. I just really want to hear what you thought. I really enjoyed the voicemails during Pride, and I don't want to stop. So if you got something to say about that conversation, a particular part of it, please leave me a voicemail, all right? Now, I do want to give another thank you to Chris and Shayna and Travell of the Bad Queers podcast and the Fanti podcast. If you missed the conversation, you can listen here. Just go to last week's, or you can watch it on the Qube's YouTube channel. You already know. A link is in the show notes. Now, for the top queer news stories. First up, Da Brat and Judy welcomed their baby boy, True legend Harris Dupart. Yes, they did. True came into the world on Thursday, July 6th at 8:30 p.m. He weighed in at 7 pounds, 8 ounces. Of course, People magazine got the exclusive again, and we ain't mad at it. I really couldn't be more happy for them growing their family. You know, I've really enjoyed watching Da Brat and Judy on television, watching their motherhood journey together from miscarriage to surgery scares to IVF. I mean, Da Brat is 49 years old, y'all. 49, and just gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They giving folks like me out here in the world a lot of hope. You know what I mean? They have been on this journey together and showing all of us that family is possible for us too. And don't we need that? I know I need that right now. So congratulations, Brat and Judy. Congratulations. In other news, Jay-Z's mom, Gloria Carter, married her longtime partner just this past week. We all came to know Jay-Z's mom was family in his 2017 track called Smile, right? I know y'all remember it. We were all like, what? And let me tell y'all something. The stars were out, okay, for this wedding. The whole family, Beyonce, Jay-Z, Blue Ivy, the babies, Tina Knowles, Kelly Rowland, Tyler Perry, and even my favorite Robin Roberts was in the building, okay? It was star-studded, honey. Congratulations, y'all. Then finally, family, if you're looking for a good documentary to get into this week, I recommend you check out The Stroll. The Stroll is directed by Kristen Lavelle. It is a Sundance Jury Award-winning doc, okay, currently playing on HBO Max and Hulu. The doc looks at the history of New York's meatpacking district, told from the perspective of Black and brown trans sex workers who lived and worked there. They recount the violence, policing, and gentrification that led to a movement for trans rights. What I thought was interesting about this doc is that Kristen, who directed it, was also in it. And so she was reliving her own story and watching herself back. Yeah, y'all, definitely go check it out. You may have noticed that I didn't have any political news, family. Y'all know how much I love the politics. But that's because me and our special guest this week, Brandon Wolf, talk about it plenty, okay? Brandon Wolf is a Pulse survivor, an advocate, and a recent author. Since surviving Pulse and losing two of his best friends, his life, as you can imagine, has just never been the same. Today, he is the press secretary for Equality Florida in the midst of the hate storm that is Ron DeSantis. So we talk about it, and we talk about how he's finding hope and what the queer folks in Florida are doing. And of course, we talk about his new book, A Place for Us. I will say interviewing, right, is where I started back in November 2009 on Blog Talk Radio. Y'all can check the receipts. My first guest, I will never forget, was Gender Just. What a time, okay? I'm sure I was talking to myself. And I moved away from interviews when I started the Queer News podcast. So I will say it has been really nice to be in conversation with folks again in this way. So stay close. We are going to take a quick break for our sponsors because they keep this pod going. And then we'll be right back with Brandon Wolf. Now, if you're interested in being a sponsor or running an ad on the show, check the link in the show notes. We got a special running for July. And I really hope that you enjoy the interview today. Until next week, family. Peace. Family, we all know food is a really dope excuse to spill tea with our friends and get real about what we're dealing with. So I've teamed up with the Cook County Department of Public Health to make Anna's Not Really Cooking Show. This show is really an excuse to talk about mental health and the great services empowered by Cook County Public Health's Here to Hear You initiative. Visit h2hucookcounty.com.
What has 144 players, 12 teams, and one league that you should tap into? If you guessed the WNBA, you already know. If you didn't, we'll get you up to speed real quick. My name is Money, and this is Rebound Revolution, bringing you the revolutionary on and off the court happenings in the W. Join me and a special guest each week as we watch them work. Listen to Rebound Revolution wherever you get your podcasts.
I got the biggest news to share with you. Are you ready for the podcast tour of the year? My company, the Qube, is going on tour where Black and Brown podcasts come alive, unheard voices are amplified, and community is celebrated. With our first ever Qube tour, you'll be part of something extraordinary. Now picture this. You're surrounded by like-minded folks, all connected through the power of shared stories and a love for podcasting. Immerse yourself in the audio world with our noise-canceling, surround sound, silent headphones. Discover podcasts created and produced by BIPOC and QTPOC creators, each offering a distinct and powerful voice that deserves to be heard. Family, I'm just saying you do not want to miss this opportunity to network, discover new shows, and engage with audio in a whole new way. Join us Saturday, July 15th in Brooklyn with the Black Podcasters Association Summer Social. If you can't make Saturday and you in New York, come Sunday. We'll be in Manhattan on July 16th at Podstream Studios with DCP Entertainment. Then, Saturday, July 22nd in Silver Spring, DMV, stand up. We got more dates, more locations. Be part of this groundbreaking event. I'm just saying you don't want to miss it. Visit our website, theqube.app/tour. TheQube.app/tour. Let's go, family.
You are now tuned in to higher frequencies. We do this frequently. Turn your radio station to E3 for that decency. Listen to great music and the latest movement. Safe listening for anyone that's tuned in. Who you waking up to? Anna DeShawn, Q Crew and Friends. It's that real talk. Online radio with the spins. You caught up in traffic, frustrated. Just check in with E3 to shift your vibrations and get elevated. That's queer radio done right. Choose to be yourself. That's the only way to live life, and that's how it's done here. Just know y'all tuned in to the greatest. Ain't no competition. We ain't worried about the other stations. Check.
Family, welcome back to the show. You know, this is your favorite queer radio personality, Anna DeShawn here, and I'm excited to be kicking off our summer interview series with Brandon Wolf. What's going on, Brandon?
Hey, how are you, Anna?
I'm doing pretty good today. I ain't gonna complain. It ain't gonna fix nothing, no way, right? So I want to start off with a few fun questions to sort of just lighten the mood. You know, we host the Queer News Podcast on E3 Radio, which is our queer radio station here in Chicago, playing queer music 24/7, 365. So I always want to know, do you have a go-to karaoke song? So there's that one song?
Oh my gosh, that's a good question. I don't have a go-to karaoke song. I feel like I try to avoid karaoke as much as possible. So it's usually whatever I get roped into with the rest of the group. And I'm like, trying to sing background vocals if I can.
Okay. So we got something out of that. You're the background vocal person? Yeah.
I'm good with that. I'm good with background vocals.
Okay, very good. And then what song right now is in your playlist that's getting the most rotation?
So there's always a lot of rotation for me. I like to go to the gym every day. And so that means, it's like an hour and a half worth of music that I've got to switch up all the time. But I have to tell you, I was really surprised by how good Ava Max's new album is. I was not expecting it to be no skips, front to back, every song I love. But that for me is on repeat for sure.
Okay, something for me to check out. I appreciate that. Apple Music, here I come. And,
love it.
and if you could sing, and you love to sing out loud, if you could do a duo with anybody, who would be the number one collab?
Oh, it's got to be Whitney. So actually, my birthday is August 9th, and that is the same day as Whitney Houston's birthday. So I have this dream of us singing something together, and maybe in another life, we'll get an opportunity to do that.
I love that. Come on, Whitney. I ain't bad. And she family, too. I mean,
right.
So there's that.
That part.
That part. Brandon, when I thought about doing this summer interview series and started making asks, you were at the top of my list because I've been following your work for a while. And I mean, it really starts with Pulse, right? So I think we should start there. So when I say June 12th, 2016, what does that bring up for you?
I mean, I think it won't surprise people that it's difficult to think about even to this day, that, before June 12th of 2016, I was a person in search of normal as a queer Black man in America. I grew up wondering if the world would ever really be big enough for someone like me. I grew up in a majority white, very conservative town in rural Oregon. I have an all-white family that I was adopted into. And so there was this sense of isolation from my identity from a very young age. I always felt like I had to try to be Black enough for some spaces, white enough for other spaces, and masculine enough to move through every space without, fear of violence or discrimination. And so really before June 12th of 2016, that was all my focus was, trying to find a place to exist in this world. And I found that. I found that in Orlando. I found that in Chosen Family. I found it in spaces like Pulse Nightclub, which, as you know, are important lifelines in our communities, right? These safe spaces. I know that term comes with baggage, but the truth is they're refuges we carve out for each other. They are little places tucked away where we can hide from a world that, essentially threatens violence and discrimination against us every time we walk out the door. So that was life for me before the shooting of June 12th, 2016. And after that, everything changed. So when I think about that day now, I think about the pain of losing my best friends. I think about the grief. I think about the way it shattered our community. I think about the anger that it filled me with, knowing that this country had so let down so many people. And I also think about my newfound sense of obligation and purpose, that up until that point, I didn't see my purpose being, advocating for civil rights or even understanding how the political process worked. But in that moment, having the blindfold ripped from my eyes and seeing just how directly impacted we are by political inaction on gun violence, by rampant anti-LGBTQ bigotry, I understood that I had a different kind of purpose on this planet.
So I talk a lot on the show about living at the intersections and what it means when at any given moment, a part of your identity could be under attack. And you really do have to choose which battles you're choosing to fight and be very clear about the war that you're going after, right? And then we see Florida today in comparison to Florida 7 years ago. I guess my question is, how do you think we got here today, 7 years later in Florida? From Pulse to today, I mean, I feel like it's night and day.
Yeah. So I moved to Florida in 2008. And what I tell people is I'm not a Floridian by birth. I'm a Floridian by choice. And I chose Barack Obama's Florida, not Ron DeSantis's Florida. And they are two very different places, right? I moved to Orlando because I wanted a place that was much more diverse. I wanted people that looked like me, people that loved like me, and I found that. And to this day, I think Orlando, in many ways, is the seat of the resistance to the DeSantis brand of right-wing, hysteria and extremist politics. But there's a lot that's taken us from Pulse in 2016 to this moment in 2023, not the least of which is, electing Donald Trump as president of the United States and unearthing a lot of these things that were hidden just under the surface that people would dance around and call economic anxiety when really there were just racism and homophobia and misogyny and all the things, right, with a different veneer on it. So I think that's number one, is that electing Donald Trump president really brought a lot of those things to the surface. They empowered a lot of the kind of bigotry and hate that now fuels the right wing in politics. And they also gave rise to people like Ron DeSantis, who in 2018 was sort of an afterthought in the gubernatorial election. He was this kind of random, weird right-wing congressman. And then Donald Trump endorsed him and he skyrocketed in the polls. He won a nomination and he barely won a general election. And so it's sort of this like Trumpification of politics and then the installation of Ron DeSantis. He sort of spends a year like trying to appear moderate, even though he's never really been very moderate. And then COVID happens and he uses real fears about school closures and masks and vaccines to become the right-wing extremist brand that he is. And now he has totally, like Donald Trump, captured the political machinery in the state of Florida. He's struggling on a national stage because, first of all, he has the personality of a wet mop. And second of all, his policies aren't really very popular in general. But here in Florida, he has managed to capture the imagination of a right wing that feels emboldened in the area of Donald Trump politics, that is hyper obsessed with easy access to guns, that has found the boogeyman they need in the transgender community. It's sort of all of these things mixed together. And Ron DeSantis is riding that train, he hopes, to the Oval Office.
Yeah, and I'm sure all of his supporters are too. But then there's y'all, right? There's you, there's Equality Florida fighting him every step of the way. And tell me, we hear a lot about what the extremists are doing in Florida. I want to hear about what y'all are doing in Florida. What does it look like to be queer in Florida right now? And how are y'all fighting back in all the ways? I would love to hear.
Yeah, I thank you for asking, because that's the story that I wish I heard more about in terms of, what Florida looks like right now. Because again, as you said, you hear about all the extremists. You hear about Moms for Liberty. You hear about all of these anti-LGBTQ policies. You hear about sort of the slide of Florida off the right-wing cliff. But the truth is there are a lot of us who live here who don't support these policies, right? There are a lot of LGBTQ people and allies in the state of Florida. That's important to remember, too, when you consider that although DeSantis won by 20 percentage points in 2022, not very many people showed up to vote. So when you think about the amount of the voting population that actually elected him, it's something like 25 to 30% of registered voters in the state of Florida elected Ron DeSantis. And that means there's a large swath of people that didn't vote for him, right? That are being subjected to these policies. So I think, in my view, the resistance is surging in the state of Florida. And it looks like, a few things. I'll give you some examples. Number one, Ron DeSantis' agenda, time and time again, has proven to be a loser. He continues to lose in court. I like to say everything DeSantis touches turns to a preliminary injunction, because courts over and over again say, what you're doing is deeply unconstitutional. It doesn't matter if they were, nominated by Donald Trump or Joe Biden or Bill Clinton or Barack Obama. All of these judges are in agreement that the things DeSantis are doing, in his assault on freedom, that those things are deeply unconstitutional. So I think that's one. It's a loser in courts. It's a loser in public opinion. His approval ratings have gone off a cliff. He's really struggling to get out of the 15 to 20% polling range in a presidential nomination race. So it's a loser publicly. It's a loser in the courts. And as a result, you're seeing this energy on the ground to push back against him. We had a town hall in Sarasota a couple of months ago, and it was really in response to all of these anti-LGBTQ policies. we had about 100, 150 people RSVP for this town hall where we were going to talk about how we push back against the policies in Florida. The day of the town hall came and 200, 250 people showed up. It was standing room only, spilling out into the foyer. We had an incredible conversation that went over time. Of course, it was like 90 minutes of us talking about what we were going to do. We challenged people to show up to the Sarasota School Board the next day. Over 300 people were there the next day wearing rainbows, waving flags, saying, we live in this community too. We deserve a voice. Those people have continued to show up at the Sarasota School Board meetings. They've continued to push back. And when Sarasota School Board members were selecting a new superintendent, those people put enough pressure on the school board that a right-wing candidate was defeated, and we got someone who may be a little more reasonable on the issues. That kind of thing is happening around the state. Pride festivals are seeing their largest attendance ever. People are sharing their stories, are being more visible. We did a Drag is Not a Crime mobilization where we did up people who are not normally drag performers. We had dozens of them show up. We actually had to turn off the signups because we didn't have enough makeup artists to do them all up. That's happening everywhere. And I'm really proud that whether it's our Safe Schools program that's working to make schools more inclusive, our Parenting with Pride program that's now working with hundreds of families across the state to turn them into advocates in their communities. No matter what the program is, we're seeing unprecedented energy in the resistance to this anti-freedom agenda of Ron DeSantis.
I love to hear about all of this that's happening because it is the stuff that I want to report on. These are the stories I want to tell. I want to hear about Drag is Not a Crime. Come on, who was up there that you would not have expected to be in drag?
Okay, my boss, our executive director, Nadine Smith, now officially has a drag persona. It is Equalitina Turner, and it is extra as you're imagining it. And I knew she was going to get in drag for this mobilization. That's really not her personality. She's very low key. She's chill. She's the executive director of our organization, has been for a long time. And her announcement that she was participating was dropping into the like company group chat, this video of her in drag doing her whole voice and performance and everything. So that was my favorite moment probably of Drag is Not a Crime, is our executive director as Equalitina Turner delivering a direct to camera address.
I cannot wait to share that. I will figure out how to spell it. And I think that is awesome. I saw one of the ladies from The View, whose name I can't recall, but she lives in Florida and she talks about going to the drag shows intentionally. Okay, Anna Navarro. Okay, yeah. So I saw her post. I saw Anna Navarro post about going to drag events in Florida and bringing her very conservative husband along, who also feels like things have gone too far.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really important. I feel like in this country, we have lost the coup to have conversations across the lines. Growing up, I had lots of conversations with conservative folks. I grew up in a very conservative community. We don't have to agree, but we also saw each other's humanity. I think to your point, electing the orange man, because that's what I call him around here, really did give these folks, the people who are filled with hate and fear, I think, around erasure and around our identities, they found somebody they could look up to. Yeah. And who was going to hold their fears and hold all of their hate and say that it's okay. And, I had the opportunity to hear Nadine Smith at Equality Illinois at the gala earlier this year. And she talked about how she feels like at the end of the day, we're going to win.
Yeah.
And that we're going to be further ahead than when we started. How are you keeping hope around that idea that we will definitely win this?
Well, there are a couple of things that make me optimistic, that give me hope. First of all, I appreciate you calling out, the loss of the ability to have real conversations in this country. There are a lot of reasons for that. In fact, Barack Obama had a great interview where he talked about social media ecosystems and living in a world where all we ever hear is we're the smartest person in the room is actually really damaging to us, right? And so there are a lot of reasons that we struggle to have those conversations. But what I've found over the last couple of years is that there are still common threads that bind us all. And when you hear people like Anna Navarro's husband saying, I think something's off, something's gone too far, we're starting to pull at those shared American values. This, we're having this conversation on the same week that we celebrate, some people celebrate July 4th. And July 4th, at its core is about freedom, right? Now, listen, we're a country that has not ever really afforded freedom to everyone. And there are things we have to atone for and reconcile with. But at its core, Americans still value freedom as something that is, a value worth defending, that it should be an unconditional value that we offer to everyone, that we're striving to give everyone access to that freedom. And so when we're having conversations about these policies and the way that right-wing politicians are showing up in our communities, even conservatives begin to agree that this doesn't feel like freedom to me. Free states don't ban books about people. Free states don't censor classroom curriculum. Free states don't erase AP African American Studies because it includes conversations on intersectionality or queer theory, right? Free states don't rip healthcare from people because you disagree with how they identify. That is not what freedom actually feels like. And so as we start to have these conversations, that feels like a value, a thread that we can pull at that begins to bring people together across those lines. In terms of what gives me optimism and hope in this moment, I agree with Nadine. I think, number one, right-wing backlash is a lagging indicator of where society is. They are fighting so hard because they already lost the culture war. There's no putting the genie back in the bottle, right? There's no world where young people can't go on TikTok or Instagram or even the new threads and see that there are queer people that exist, right? There's no world where there aren't books about queer people on shelves or movies with queer characters. And the right wing is fighting back fiercely against it, knowing that there is no winning that war, that LGBTQ people exist, will always exist, and there's no way to erase us. And the other thing that gives me hope, I'll just close with this, is that we've been here before as a community. This is not the first time the LGBTQ community has been used as a cudgel. It's not the first time our existence has been hypersexualized or demonized or politicized. That actually has been our entire existence in this country and beyond. And guess what? Every single time the right wing has used us as a punching bag, we've always found a way toward progress. We've always marched toward justice and freedom for all people. I believe that we're going to find that same sense of fight back right now, and we're going to do it with more allies and more resources than we've ever had.
And that's the hope that I want to give folks during this interview series, is that this is only the beginning. And we are in this for the long haul. And I believe we are having a reckoning with democracy. And so when you talk about freedom, we are talking about at the heart of what democracy is. And I agree. I think most Americans believe in democracy, right? I think United States of America is a great experiment, right? And we have failed numbers of times, but those who fight for freedom, right? Oh gosh, I think about Ella Baker in this moment. We who believe in freedom cannot rest, right? That is her quote, which then turned into a wonderful song, Sweet Honey on the Rock. I think about that because those who have always been underrepresented or on the margins have been determined to say, I will not settle for this. And it's not everybody, and it never is everybody. Right. I think that's another thing we have to think about, is that everybody's not going to join us. But when we win, everybody's going to be happy about it. I feel like
that's right.
Like that's been the sentiment
that's right.
throughout history.
That's another thing that Nadine says really well is, our job has always been to fight for an inclusive brand of freedom, right? A welcoming brand of freedom, a truly American brand of freedom that tells everyone, no matter who you are, no matter who you love, no matter who you worship or don't worship, it doesn't matter. You should have access to freedom because that is our core fundamental American value. And so it's our job, as we're talking about the future of this country, to paint a vision of a freedom that is so inclusive, that is so boldly and audaciously welcoming to all people, that even our fiercest opponents can't help but see themselves in it. That is the task of our movement, because that's what freedom really is. That's what it really means. When it's a value, not a campaign slogan, that's what freedom looks like. It's a tough job to do. It doesn't always mean we're going to agree with one another. But again, I think in conversations with people, when they get to know their trans neighbor, when they get to know their their queer neighbor, when they get to know the Black and brown folks in their communities, the undocumented immigrants, what they learn is that value still rings true for them, that they believe their neighbors are human beings who are deserving of the same dignity, respect, and civil liberties as everyone else.
Period. Nothing else needs to be said on that. I mean, that is really at the heart of it. And that's really why I do what I do, right? So we've got Queer News telling stories, and then we just started the Qube, which is our podcast production company that tells the stories at the intersections of race and sexuality, and a place of discoverability for the very best BIPOC and QTPOC podcasts out here in the space, because we have to be able to see representation in like a very tangible way. And we also have to be able to tell the stories of folks who are on the margins, because that is where we see their humanity. And storytelling gives us the ability to do that in such a beautiful way, and in a way that doesn't elicit a response. It's just like, hey, here's my story. Get to know who I am. And at the end of the day, if you still feel like I don't deserve a right, then this is a conversation that I can't help. I can't help you after that. But when you know somebody, when you can hear their story, there's just no way you can believe that they don't deserve the same human rights as you. We can disagree, but if you believe in democracy and freedom, there's no way I, sitting here as a tax-paying citizen, should have anything less than what you have in your experience walking the streets of the United States of America every single day. I mean, I think for me, it's just that simple.
That's right. And by the way, regardless of what you hear about the rise of right-wing extremism, a vast majority of people agree with you. That's where a vast majority of the country is. A vast majority of the country are good people, kind people who want to do well by their neighbors. We are, pummeled with poison, political poison every day. Social media is rife with it. Obviously, Twitter is rife with it. The, cable news media infrastructure is rife with it. We're ingesting that poison every single day, and it makes us act in ways that are unnatural for us, that are outside where we usually live. But again, when we break down those barriers, when we get past the talking points, when we move past these media ecosystems we're living in and we see each other as human, we fall back on that idea that, this is a human being who deserves exactly the same dignity and respect that I do.
Absolutely. And now, Brandon, I can't let you leave here without talking about your new book, because now you're an author, okay? A Place for Us, the memoir, right? No, A Place for Us, a memoir. Yeah. I don't want to be making up words here. To your book, how exciting is that? Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I'm really proud and honored to be able to just capture a bit of my own journey and my story in these pages. And I honestly, the best part of it has been reading people's response and how it's resonating with folks. It warms my heart to read.
And tell me, why did you want to write a book now?
There have been so many points over the last 7 years that I've thought about whether writing a book would be right for me. And it never just felt like the right time, right? And then the summer of 2020 happened. And for so many people, there was this reckoning. There was, a deadly pandemic that was exposing the fractures in our systems, exposing the holes that people fall in, where they're left behind. And there was the murder of George Floyd that rocked the conscience of the nation. And I was feeling something really particular in the wake of George Floyd's murder. I was on a call with Nadine, and she said, you feel a little disconnected. It feels like there's something off about your energy right now. And we got to talking, and I said, I think I feel guilty. And I don't know why I feel that sensation. That is the emotion that's coming up for me, is guilt in the wake of George Floyd's murder. And as we started to digest and process it, it was because I was feeling a sense of disconnect or isolation from my identity as a Black man in America that I had spent so long trying to assimilate into the culture around me as a young person, that I'd been cut off from a lot of the things that helped me identify as who I am. And Nadine said it again, very profoundly. That's what she does. She said that cutting us off from pieces of our identity, from communities that are like us, is a function of white supremacy. It is designed to isolate you and strip you of your collective power. maybe it's time for you to explore what that has meant for you. And so that was the first time that I really understood what the beginning of this book was, that it's not a book about Pulse. It's not just a book about Orlando. It's a book about being a queer Black person in America who struggles desperately to find a place to belong, to assimilate into the world around him, only to fall in love with chosen family and a community that looks a little more like him, that loves a little more like him. So again, this book, I hope it speaks especially to young queer people of color. I hope that it speaks to people living at the intersections of identities. And if you're not one of those people, I hope it speaks to you, because everybody knows what it feels like to struggle to belong. Everybody knows what it feels like to have people in your lives that you love and lose, to get past grief and pain and find purpose in the world. I think it's all around just a beautiful story that I've been honored to be able to share with people.
Yes, and I can't wait to read it. So where can we get it? All the places we can get good and bad books?
All the places you can get good and very bad books, you can find a place for us. You can also go on my website, brandonwolf.us. I have a whole page dedicated to it, make it easy for you. My only ask is that you share with me what you think of it. That's my favorite part of the process.
I love it. And if you visit brandonwolf.us, you'll see all of the amazing reviews, okay, from some of your favorite people. When I saw Joanne Reed's review, I was like, child, you don't need no other review for me. Okay, I was getting the book anyway. She says, a story of race, place, and the struggle for belonging that will drive you to tears and expand your capacity for hope. And expanding your capacity for hope. I mean, that is a whole lot. That's a whole lot. So you giving folks hope in this book?
That's my hope. That's my goal from writing this down. Part of, again, the journey that I wanted to take people on is I've been through a lot over the last 34 years of my life, but especially over the last 7. There's something that just changes who you are when you lose people you love, not just as friends, but as family. And I lost family members at Pulse. And what I wanted to share with people, not just the story of belonging and finding a place to be in the world, but the story of how we learn to navigate through those things. Because as a globe, we've been through a lot over the last few years. We've suffered an extreme amount of loss and grief and pain. There's intense division in our society. People if they haven't lost family members, they've cut family members off because they're just different these days than they were maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And my hope is that when people finish this book, their capacity for hope is expanded and they understand the value of being in this thing together. Doesn't mean we're always going to agree. Doesn't mean we're not going to have our moments where we squabble or that the tensions of our relationship are pulled at. But the only way we get through any of this is together, with community, locked arm in arm, deciding we're going to move society forward.
I couldn't agree more. Brandon, can you tell folks where they can follow you?
Yeah, I'm on all social media. I don't use TikTok very well, but aside from that, I'm on all social media. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram. I am on the new threads at Brandon J. Wolf. I'd love to stay in contact.
There it is. And with that, thank you, Brandon, for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Anytime.
If you enjoyed what you heard, rate and review us inside your favorite podcasting app. This podcast is written and produced by me, Anna DeShawn. Podcast editing by Experience J of Just Listen Media. And brought to you by E3 Radio, your #1 queer radio station playing queer music and reporting on queer news in high rotation.